And what someone told me was 2 words, and they said, someone's waiting. There's someone waiting to hear your story. There's someone waiting to know that they're not alone. They're not the only one that's going through what you went through. There's someone waiting to know that there is light on the other side of this darkness. And there's someone waiting to know, how do I get there? So if by sharing your story can do that for someone, even if it's one person, that's all that matters.
Welcome back to the Pay It Forward podcast. I am one of your hosts, Austin Seward, along with my co-host, Keegan Walls. And today we have on the podcast, Jamie Dahl. Jamie is a speaker, author, wife, mother, fifth generation member of the Dahl family, which has been a staple to the Lacrosse community for a very long time. Passionate about helping women through motherhood, through marriage, through trials and tribulations through their life. So this message will be mainly geared towards more for women probably, and really sharing the power of sharing your story and being vulnerable enough to share your story to make an impact on others. So thank you for being here today, Jamie. We're excited to dive into your story.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate you having me here today and
Absolutely.
letting me share my story. Thank you.
So tell us more about what you're doing now. I know you have a book. Tell us a little bit about that and what you're up to now.
Yes. So the book is about my story with breast cancer. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I really felt that there were so many women out there that were struggling through the same things that I was going through, and felt like the best way that I could help them and answer a lot of the questions that I kept getting was to put everything down into a story and to just share it that way. And so that has been just a really wonderful way to use a really difficult time in my life to help someone else. And currently, other things that I'm, I guess, doing right now is, like you mentioned, I'm a wife and I'm a mom. That's my number one job. That's what I love to do, and where I feel very called right now in this season of my life. I'm also busy as a community volunteer, and I work a lot in the community through other local nonprofits and through Lacrosse Community Foundation. I served on the board for about 10 years and was the chair of the grants committee for about 3 years. So really just trying to be involved with my community, helping my family, being a wife and a mom, and then sharing my story through my book and other speaking engagements around the community.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear your story today. So why don't you take us back to the beginning of that story? I know you spent some time in New York as a professional dancer.
Yes, I did. I grew up here in the Lacrosse area, but then I moved away, and I was always passionate about dance. It was something that I did growing up. I honestly never thought that it would be something that I would do as a career. I always thought I have to go to school and get a real job. But it was something I could not get away from and felt still very called to do even after I graduated college. And so I moved out to, or actually before I moved to New York, I auditioned for to be a backup dancer for a contemporary Christian artist at the time. It was back in the 90s, and his name was Carmen. He was kind of big back then if you're a 90s Christian music person. And I got the job first in about 5 of his music videos, and then went on tour with him for a little over a year. And it was wonderful. It was a bus and truck tour, so we traveled all over the country with 6 semi-trucks and 4 tour buses, and played big arenas all over the country. And then after that, moved to New York City and studied there. I was on scholarship at Steps on Broadway, and worked there at the studio, took classes, auditioned for shows and things that would come through town. And then I also, to pay my bills, I was a shoe model. So and great, it was actually a great job, and that was how I paid my bills, so I could afford to live in New York. And then I moved from New York City out to Los Angeles, and I worked in the fashion industry, actually out there, and worked with a stylist. So we would dress artists for their video shoots and award shows and photo shoots. So still in the entertainment industry, but just a little different side of it. And so I was still able to kind of be in that world that I was passionate about, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
So.
Were there any like well-known artists or people that you got to work with in the fashion industry out in LA?
Yeah, a lot of Christian artists, actually. So we worked with BB and CeCe Winans. We worked with Brian McKnight and, let's see. Oh, Yolanda Adams was a big one. She's a big gospel singer. And so it was really fun. Rick James, a lot of some of the old like
That's
80s,
awesome.
like the Gap Band, and worked with a lot of those artists. So that was fun.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the cooler venues that you guys performed at?
Yeah, I think probably one of the most impressive venues for me at the time was the Georgia Dome in Atlanta.
Okay.
I don't think it's standing anymore, but it was an enormous dome where the Atlanta Falcons played, and we had an audience of 65,000 people. And our stage was in the round, so you're looking around and you're just surrounded by thousands of people, and that was just impressive. I mean, to get to the stage, we had to ride in golf carts, and because it was so big, but just amazing. So I think that was one of my favorite ones. Although when I lived in New York, we performed at the MetLife building on the Upper East Side on New Year's Eve, because New York at the time did something called First Night New York, where they would have all these arts performances, whether it was jazz or dance, all over the city. And so the company that I was in performed there and at the MetLife building on New Year's Eve, and that's pretty wild.
That's awesome. What was that like as a performer, to perform at that? I mean, that's the next. Right? You grow up doing especially around here, Viterbo and all these places, but the Georgia Dome, New York, what's that adrenaline rush like when you're doing those big performances?
Oh, it's incredible because especially when that is your passion and you're able to live it out on that type of a level. It's such a blessing. And I think what I loved about, especially working, with Carmen, is because it was a ministry, it was melding the two things that I love most. It was my faith and dance at the time. Those are my passions. And so to be able to do those two things together at one time was just incredible.
And so then how long were you in New York and LA? What was that time frame?
Yes. So I was on tour for about a year. I lived in New York for a little over a year, and then I was out in LA for 2 years. So probably around a span of 4 to 5 years total kind of in that industry.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And how did you land back in small town Lacrosse, Wisconsin after this awesome journey? What brought you back to Lacrosse?
Yeah, I'd been gone for a total of 14 years at that point, because then I had actually lived in Texas as well. And there was just something that was drawing me home. And I knew, I'd done all these things that I was really excited about and proud of, but my family was here. And there was just this strange pull to come back. And I'll be honest, I was a little terrified because it's coming back to a small town. I didn't have a plan. I was single. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was a little scared about changing my lifestyle and coming back to the small community. But it is such an incredible community. And being close to my family was very important. And I'm so glad that I did, because I can see even now, as you look back, the reasons why it was time to come home.
Yeah, well, Lacrosse is glad that you came back too, because not a lot of people are like, you know what? I'm in LA and New York. I think Lacrosse. That's where Lacrosse, Wisconsin, I think, is calling my heart.
It's calling me, yes.
So, but yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So I know a big part of your story, and we'll get there, is your journey through breast cancer. So at what point was that in your journey, and maybe walk us through what that was like?
Yes. So in 2017, so I had been back home at this point for probably about 12 years.
Okay.
I was married. I met my husband, and we had 2 daughters. At the time, they were 6 and 8 years old. And life was great. I think like many people, life is good. You're doing all the things. You're the busy mom or husband, working, running around, and that was my life. And I loved it, and it was great. And there was really nothing that I could see that was going to stop that. And then all of a sudden, in 2017, I felt a lump in my breast. And I remember mentioning it to my husband. And at the time, I just thought, I'm sure it's nothing. It's just body changes, nothing. And, of course, like most women do, they put it off. Mm-hmm. And, and honestly, I just kind of felt, well, I'm too busy to really handle something like this right now. So I'm just going to let it go. But then a few months later, a friend had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it just kind of put up the red flags. I thought, okay, I need to get this checked out. And so I went into to my doctor, And before I knew it, I found myself in an ultrasound room, getting an ultrasound, and still even in complete denial. I mean, I remember laying on the table thinking, okay, after this, I need to run to Target, and then I have to go do this. And then the doctor stopped me and she said, Jamie, I want you to take a look at something. And I sat up and I turned and looked behind me and looked at the screen, the ultrasound screen, and she pointed to this really small little white mass. And she said, I don't know what this is. I knew she knew what it was. But that was her way of saying that we needed to check this out. And so all of a sudden, the door flew open. Nurses were coming in with instruments, getting ready to do a biopsy. I couldn't even call my husband and tell him what was going on because my phone was locked in a locker. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. So we did the biopsy. And then I had to wait 4 days to get the results, which was probably one of the most excruciating 4 days of my life. And then I got the phone call at 4:00 on a Monday from the doctor, and they said, Jamie, you have cancer. And it's just in an instant, your life just stops on a dime. You know, all those things that you thought you had to do or that were so important are all of a sudden not important at all. And so I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer that required chemotherapy, 4 rounds of it, every 21 days. And it wreaked havoc on my body. I mean, all the things that you can imagine would happen, were with chemo happened. I lost my hair. My energy was completely drained. I was a shell, really, of myself. And then after those 4 rounds, then I had a double mastectomy, which is where all of the breast tissue is removed from both the breasts. And I had reconstruction at that point with silicone implants. And then my life was supposed to just go on. And I think that's one of the things that's really difficult for cancer survivors is you go through all of this, you just power through this difficult, the treatments and all the things that you're going through. And then when it's, air quotes, all over, you're just left picking up the pieces. And everyone thinks, oh, it's okay, you can go on with your life. But you don't. You have so much physical recovery, mental recovery to do. And it takes, it took me a good year to physically even feel like myself again, let alone mentally feel like I was somewhat back on track. So that's really, really kind of the story of my breast cancer journey. And really my faith is what got me through it.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah. I can relate to that a lot. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer probably 2 years ago now, 3 years ago. And like hearing you talk about the waiting game of getting the biopsy results and like knowing that moment, like I can relate to that and vividly remember where we were and hearing the C word. And that's traumatic for a lot of people to hear that, even not knowing the extent of what happened, but you just hear that word and like, that's not a good place to be, not a good thing to hear. So it sounds like your faith was kind of the core of who you were before that. Was there ever a time that you questioned that during this journey, or was that always your rock, your foundation through this?
Yeah, that was always my rock. However, I will say that there were definitely times when I didn't have the energy to even pray for myself. I didn't have the desire to or the energy to because I was just so exhausted. And in those moments, those were the times when I really relied on friends, to literally hold up my hands and, pray for me. There were definitely moments where it feels a little rocky, but it was actually very beautiful because I was at such a low place that I had nowhere to go. I couldn't control what was happening to myself. I was completely out of control. And when you are completely out of control, that is when you realize how much you need to rely on the Lord and rely on God to help you through those times and how much you need him. And that's when he shows up in these beautiful ways. And I felt more connected and more loved by the Lord in that moment when I was going through that difficult time than I ever had in my entire life. And so for that, I'm so grateful because I had never experienced that kind of love and faithfulness before because I had never had a reason to.
Yeah.
And so I look back and feel grateful for that.
Yeah, we just got done having a podcast with Shane and like coming from a drastic place of not knowing God and then knowing God. And I throughout going through that, I feel like sometimes if you do know God, it's sometimes it just gets comfortable. You know what I mean? As if we're Christians for a long period of time and we don't know what the other side looks like, and we've always been Christians, like sometimes you just kind of get comfortable through that. And not to say that like cancer is not from God, but he can use those situations to bring you back closer to him.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, that's an awesome part of that. What were some of the other lessons that you've learned throughout that journey?
Yeah. So, and I love that question because I think that right there is just a key. You know, when you go through something difficult, being able to look at it and say, what can I learn from this? Versus just, oh, I'm just suffering. And suffering is you know, we all go through some area of suffering in our life. But to be able to say, what can I learn from this is absolutely essential. And so, you know, I think a couple of the big points that I really took from it was, one was just the importance of being still. You know, I think that people don't take the time to be still in their lives. You know, our culture really is always saying, hey, what are you doing? Are you busy? Are you productive? Are you hustling? You know, all the things. But yet there's such power in being still. And I was forced to be still. I felt like I'd been hit by a Mack truck and then run over 3 times and thrown in a gully. And I had to just literally sit on my porch and watch the birds because I couldn't do anything else. But because of that, God really used that time to pull some things out that I needed to work on, really pull some weeds. There was some pride there I needed to face. And then I could really hear his voice better because I was quiet. I mean, you think about when you're talking, you're not listening, right? Because you're talking. So when you're quiet, you can hear more. When you're moving, you're not receiving. So being able to be still was just a huge lesson for me. In fact, when I was talking about this with my husband a long time ago, I was preparing for a talk I was giving, and I was telling him about this concept of being still, and he's like, "Well, yeah, it's like a Toyota Prius." I'm like, okay, really? How is that like a Toyota Prius?
Right.
My car husband, you know, in the automotive industry. And he said, well, you know, it's a hybrid vehicle, and hybrid vehicles run on, you know, either electric or gas, and then a battery, and they use something called regenerative braking. So whenever you put your foot on the brake, it captures that kinetic energy and recharges the battery. So I said, okay, so when you put your foot on the brake, it gives you more energy. It's like, yeah, it's like brilliant, absolutely. It's like a Toyota Prius.
Yeah.
So, you know, are we putting our foot on the brake enough in our lives? I think that's so important. And then I think the other big lesson I learned is just how to be resilient. You know, when you go through a difficult time, because like I said, we're all going to go through trials. That's a given. But are you going to be able to go through that trial and make it through that trial? Or are you going to be able to be resilient and snap back, maybe even better than you were before that trial? So I think what that looked like for me was really 4 stages that I saw myself go through in that whole process. Once I was able to get through it and look back on it, I saw that, you know, the first stage was, of course, the trial. It's the junk that you're going through. It's whatever that is. And that can be cancer. It could be financial issues. It could be divorce. It could be death. Anything is a trial, right? You're just in survival mode at that point. But then the next phase that I saw myself go into was really that perseverance phase. And that's a phase where you just have to keep going. And, you know, so the practical things that I did just to keep going is you just got to move. And so whether that was just getting up one morning and actually putting on clothes that weren't pajamas, or putting on some makeup and making myself feel a little bit more like myself, just moving, even if it's just a little bit, don't stop, just move, keep going. And having a forward-thinking mindset, always looking towards the future. Something that I did a lot when I was going through my trial was I would mentally picture myself a year from then, and I would think, okay, well, what am I gonna be doing? How am I gonna look? I'm gonna be sitting in a pool or at a pool with my kids, healthy, and my hair is gonna start growing back, and I'm gonna be sipping an iced tea. I mean, I would visually picture myself a year from where I was, because what that did is it gave me hope, knowing I'm going to make it. I'm telling myself, I'm going to make that. I'm going to make it out of this. So keeping that forward-thinking mindset really helped me to persevere. And then the next stage that I saw myself go through was the character phase of it really grows your character. Like I mentioned before, there were areas that were revealed that needed some work. It's like when you refine gold, you have to heat it up to a really hot temperature for all those impurities to get to the top, and they skim off those impurities, heat it up again to get a pure sample of gold. And so when you're going through trial, you're getting heated up. Your life is getting put over the fire, and some stuff starts to rise to the top. So it's that character growth and being able to realize, okay, I needed to work on this. I needed to work on that. Yeah, I had a little too much focus on this, and really learning from that. And then the last piece was really this hope piece. Once I got through all of that, I saw the value in taking my story and doing something good with it, not just burying it and putting it under a carpet or on a shelf somewhere, but how can I use this for good? Because, God says he'll take all things and turn them for good for those who love him or are called according to his purpose. So how can I take this and help someone else? And what that does is it takes your pain and turns it into purpose. And that is beautiful. And it gives you not only a way to heal from the trauma that you've been through, but it gives you just an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I can now use this to help someone else.
Yeah.
So going back just a little bit to like your second point, like the impurities and the things that you have to wipe away. Like, what were some things in that, right? Because so often until we're faced with that challenge, we don't even understand maybe where we have some like idols or where I've put my identity. Like in the midst of that, right? Not being your full strength, like losing your hair, not being able to like fully be there, right? Like you said, your family, like being a wife and a mom, like that's what you love. Obviously that's going to change going through like chemotherapy and not having that energy. What were some of those things that maybe like fell off due to the circumstances that were good, right? Like that God's like, you got to set those bags down and you can't bring them with you on the next step.
Yes.
What were some things that you kind of had to like leave off?
Right. I think control. I think there was a sense of control that I can do it all myself. And, I think a lot of times women in particular have that mindset, like that they have to do it all themselves. They've got to run the ship essentially and not take any help. And I think that was one area that I had no control. I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't take care of my family. I had to just literally take care of myself and be selfish and take care of myself at that moment, which was hard for me to do. But what it did is it showed me the importance of relying on others and letting other people help you and asking for help. And I think within that, when people don't ask for help, there's a pride issue because they're thinking, I can do it myself. I don't need help. But by not allowing people to help you or asking for help, not only are you exerting this, control, but you're not allowing other people to use their gifts and their talents to feel like a blessing to you. And so I think that was a big one, is just letting go of the control of always having to have to do it myself. And then, like I've mentioned a couple of times, just the pride aspect, even just in my physical appearance. I felt pretty good that I looked kind of decent for my age at the time. But then when you look in the mirror and you see a bald woman staring back at you with sunken eyes and just a shell of herself, and you don't feel beautiful, you feel just horrible, not attractive. And I think there was, God was kind of shining a little light on, do you find your identity in the way that you look or in who I've made you to be? And that was a really big moment too for me.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think oftentimes you don't need to have a trial to go through those things. Like you were talking before about creating space and time. Like you can create that in your life without having to go through that.
Absolutely.
And be proactive in that. I think of when you're talking about the 4 lessons you've learned through that, I think of like working out, like something good that you should be doing for your health and your body. With step 1, like you're going it's going to suck when you start. If you're overweight and you're getting back in the gym, it's going to suck.
Yeah.
You're going to have to persevere for a period of time before you start seeing any results, and it's going to suck. And sometimes you just got to show up, and it's not going to make you feel great all the time. But as you continue going through that, you learn some lessons that I shouldn't be eating this or eating that, and then helping others do the same. So I think that's so applicable to anything, and you don't necessarily have to endure a trial that's out of your control. You can use those lessons and apply it to just something that's hard in general that you should be doing. So
Absolutely.
and I know that we've talked about this before as well in preparing for this, is you've recently developed the breast implant illness. Did I say that correct?
Yes, I know it's kind of a mouthful.
Okay. Tell us more about now that journey and some of the lessons that you've learned through that.
Yes. So about 4 years after going through all of that, I thought I was okay. I'm done. I'm moving on. Life is good. And then I started having these really strange symptoms. I had this constant dull headache in the back of my head. I had extreme dry eyes. I had heart palpitations, difficulty breathing, just fuzzy like brain fog. I'd get dizzy. And I just thought, what in the world? What is going on? And so a few things started just kind of pop up that made me start to think a little bit about breast implant illness, because I had these implants put in for my reconstruction. And I started talking to some other women, started doing some research, and I really just felt like something is not right. And so I brought it up to a physician that I see who's a functional medicine doctor, and he said, well, let's just run some tests and just see. And so he ran some heavy metal tests, and sure enough, I was high on some certain heavy metals. And he said, well, all of these are potentially used in breast implants. And I remember my husband came to that particular appointment with me, and we walked out of the appointment, and I said, well, what do we do? And he said, you need to get those out. And I said, yep, I need to get them out. And it was devastating because, here I just been through the ringer. I'm like, really? Now I got to go through this, another surgery, another like body disfigurement, like really. But I knew that's what it was. And so I had them removed, and it's called an explant. And I was left, because I'd already had a double mastectomy, all the breast tissue was gone. So there was nothing left. And so they did what's called an aesthetic flat closure, which just means that pretty much everything is gone. And so for lack of a better way to describe it, my front looks like my back, with 2 8-inch scars from my sternum to underneath my arms. And it was, there were so many mixed feelings with that. I mean, I was thrilled to have it done, and so glad I did, because when the doctor did the procedure, they found that one of the implants was grossly ruptured and broken open and was leaking the contents into my body. And so I felt so relieved to have it done. I felt like my life had been saved twice now. And but you're left again with this disfigurement and essentially being a double amputee twice with the same body parts. And it's a tough thing to handle, especially as a woman. It's very much, your femininity is definitely a part of that. But I didn't really care too much about it, because I knew that this was saving my life. And it's not about, it really, again, was one more lesson that it's not about our external appearance. It's about what's inside, and that's what's most important.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, Jamie. I know you and your husband, Andrew, founded the local Adult Teen Challenge organization, which I support and is an awesome, awesome organization here locally. Tell us how that came to be and where did that come from?
Yeah, well, thank you for your support with that. I really appreciate it. So Adult and Teen Challenge is a national organization, and it's an organization that helps people who are struggling with addictions. So where that came from is my husband is about 18 years sober, and he is very comfortable with me talking about it. He talks about it all the time. And so that was, definitely part of his story. And then we also lost his mother about a month after we were married. She struggled with addiction as well. And one of the things that she asked that he and I do is to help women specifically that are struggling with addiction. And at the time, we didn't really know what that looked like. And we're just, both he and the rest of the family were just reeling from this tragic loss of his mother. So they, my husband and his brothers started a foundation to just help local organizations dealing with addiction. But then a few years later, we started to hear more about this organization called Adult and Teen Challenge. And my husband looked into it. It's a faith-based residential treatment center. And he really liked what he saw. It had been around since the 1960s. He's a business guy, so he likes the return on investment. And it has about a 78% success rate if a client stays within the program, which is almost unheard of in the addiction world. And so he's like, all right, this is it. And so he just got to work putting together a business plan, talking with a lot of other adult and teen challenges in areas near us, getting a lot of information. And we hired on an incredible executive director and his wife, Kevin and Jess Shaler, and we opened it. We're going on our 5th year, so we opened in 2019. And it's just been a wonderful opportunity to really serve women in this community and beyond who are struggling with addiction.
Awesome.
And how many women have come through that already in the 5 years?
Yes, we've had over 100 women come through our program.
Wow.
So it's been amazing. And yeah, every story is just more incredible than the next. And we're just so honored to be able to just watch God work within this organization and just see lives completely changed. It's beautiful.
So for women that are struggling with addiction, are a lot of those people local, or are there a bunch of adult teen challenges around our area and people drive for a while to get to a certain center, or how does that work?
Right. So there's over 200, I think we're 271. I have to make sure if that's correct or not, but the center in the United States. So there's, we serve both local women, and then we've had people from as far as Las Vegas come to us as well. So there are centers all over. Some people like to get out of the community that they're in, if that's kind of a trigger for them, and go to one that's a little bit further away. But we have a lot of local clients have come to us, which is great. We have a lot of clients that have come from other communities and then have gotten sober and gotten their lives together and want to stay here because it's such a great community and because we have a great support system for them. So it's a little mix of both.
Wow.
Yeah.
How have you been able to use your story in relating to some of the women that are going through these trials right now through that organization?
Yes. I think that pain is pain, no matter what you've gone through. And so I don't have a history of addiction. That's not something that I have experienced personally, but I have gone through a difficult time where I have felt my lowest. I've been at my bottom. And so when I interact and spend time with these women, I might not be able to relate to exactly what they've been through, but I can say, hey, I understand what it feels like to feel alone, to feel despair, to feel like there's no hope. And so I get that, and but here's how God walked me through it. Here's how I know he can walk you through this too. And so it gives me I like to say a little street cred, because I'm not coming in there like, oh, everything's great.
For sure.
Like, I've been through some stuff too. And I like that. And I appreciate my trials for that reason, that I can have something to offer as well.
We're talking about sharing your story, and I just think back, I can't remember the gal's name, went through the program for Adult Teen Challenge, and she shared her testimony at Leading with Power in front of a group of 200 guys.
Yes.
And I don't think there was a dry eye in that room. And for somebody to be bold enough to share their story through what they went through, a lady to share it in front of a group of that many men, it takes so much courage. So I was inspired through listening to her story. I can't remember her name. I've met her many times, but awesome organization doing awesome things. So I know Adult Teen Challenge is not only for women, it is in this area, but there are other programs that are for men as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, there's men's programs, there's teen programs, there's mother and children programs. There are other areas near us that have some of those programs. Ours, like I said, is just women right now.
And what's the vision long term for that organization here?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to, would love to continue to grow it. There's such a need. I mean, it's one of the biggest problems that we see, I know, in our community and multiple communities all over the country. So we would love to continue to grow that, be able to serve more women. So yeah, we're excited just to see what.
How does that happen? Like, how can people help support that and make that happen? Because I've talked with Kevin, and like, they're always full, and there's a waiting list of ladies that want to be a part of the program. What does the program need to grow?
Yes. Well, the program is completely funded by donations. We don't get any government funding whatsoever. So it is completely donation-based, and we don't require our clients to pay for the program. Obviously, if they can in any way, that's great, but we don't require that because we never want to turn anyone away for the inability to pay. So donations are always welcome. They can go right to the website, which is atcww.org, and donate straight on our website. All of those monies are going directly to literally saving lives. Lives have been saved, and many of the women will say that they would not be here today if it wasn't for this program.
Yeah, awesome. Would encourage everybody to go and support that organization for sure. So let's shift gears a little bit again and talk more about Dahl Automotive. And obviously, like I said, a community staple, has done so much for the community, been around, like there's a museum, Dahl Museum, right, to share the history of the business, of the family. So what is it like being a part of the fifth generation of the Dahl family? And Andrew, your husband, is the president and CEO. So what is it like being the spouse of somebody who's in that position, and how do you, there's a lot of questions wrapped up in this.
There. I'm like, okay, I got to remember all these.
But just share with us a little bit about that experience. And
yeah, it's, first of all, it's such an honor to be a part of this wonderful family. And the business has been around since 1911. And so Andrew and his brothers are fifth generation auto dealers. We're the eighth oldest Ford dealer in the country. And it's such a neat business. And Andrew says it all the time, that he's so grateful that his forefathers thought to get into the automotive industry because it's such an essential business. And, our, and I don't want to take any of his thunder away, but it's, our vision is to keep people moving. And that's so important. You think of everyone's lives. You need to take a family member to the hospital. You need to get to the grocery store. You need to take your kids to school. I mean, that's what an automotive or what a vehicle does. And so being able to be that for the community and then be able to serve the community through our organization and partner with nonprofits and be able to help is truly an honor. And so being married to Andrew is it's a blessing. I just love the guy. He's so great. But knowing, when you ask about what it's like to get to marry someone in this business, just funny story. So on our very first date, our first date was Halloween. It was the only night that we had free. And now Halloween is obviously October 31st, which is the last day of the month. And if you are in retail, you understand that it goes by months, right? The number of cars, your quotas, they come in by the end of the month. So, and he was working the sales desk at that time. And so I'm waiting for him to show up on our first date. And he's half hour late. He's an hour late. He's 2 hours late. And I thought, okay. And then he comes flying up the door and he said, it's the last day of the month. I'm so sorry I couldn't leave. And so that was a little snippet into what my world was going to be like, just knowing that that's the life of being in this business. But what's great about it, though, is I get to watch firsthand his passion and the family's passion in general for people and what they do. And I think one of the most important things that has been handed down from generation to generation is just that this is not about us. This business is not about the Dahl family. It's about our family serving the community. And the communities that have been so good to us. And that has just been ingrained in every generation, and something that we feel very called to ingrain in the next generation because it is really the core of who we are.
Yeah, that's great. What are some things that, being the spouse of somebody who's the leader of a big organization, what are some things that you have to deal with being that person, that go-to, that, because a lot of times the leader of the organization doesn't have many people to go to, right? So they default to their spouse, their family. So what are some things you have to deal with in that?
Just being a support for him, 100% is the most important thing. And I think he would say that too, is, we're really a team, and he is such an amazing support for me and the things that I'm involved in. And I'm really a sounding board for him too. When he comes home and just needs to talk through something at work, or, hey, what do you think about this XYZ, whatever that is. Just being able to give him my thoughts and just have that honest opinion, and just to talk through things and pray through things is really important to him, and in a way that I feel that I can really serve him as my husband. One of the things that we do every day is we have a standing date at 6:20 a.m., and that is our prayer time every morning. And we get up and we go and do our own quiet times, and then we meet at 6:20, and we do a quick check-in. How are you doing? What's going on in your life right now? What's going on in work? How can we pray? And then we pray together. We pray about family. We pray about the business. We pray for specific people or things. And even if he's out of town, he'll call me at 6:20, and we have our prayer time over the phone. And I think that has just been really great. Not only does it connect us as a couple, as a married couple, because ultimately that comes first, right? If you don't have a strong family unit, not only between the two of us, but between all the branches of the family, then you don't have a good culture at work. So making sure that that's first and foremost for me and for him is super important. And just knowing that, I think for him, the comfort of knowing that I got the home stuff, I've got the kids, I'm running them, I'm doing all those things so that he can focus on what God has called him to do has been a very comforting thing, I think, for him, for sure.
He can't be 2 hours late to that one.
No, and no more.
Definitely not.
So what are some other things going back to you, like business wise, that you're currently involved in? Because don't you do some stuff with like makeup?
Yeah, well, I was really involved with Beauty Counter. It's
Yes.
a personal care product company, and I did that for about 7 years. Still involved with it. It's what's interesting about it is, at the time I learned a lot about just toxic ingredients in certain products that we use on our bodies. Before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had learned all of these things that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime, and then to all of a sudden be the 1 in 8 was just a little mind-blowing. So grateful for that, for all of that information that I had learned and the experience that I'd had with that and working with Beauty Counter. And I think a lot of that has really grown me more, even just being able to, I think it was prepping me really for sharing my own story, because when I was really involved with that, I was sharing the story of Beauty Counter and of the importance of what you put on your skin. And so it was almost a little bit of a training for what was going to be coming in my future that I didn't know. So yeah, that was definitely something that.
And so now sharing your story, what's the impact you've seen lately of continuing to share that story, that the impact of being able to be vulnerable, to be open, and like the impact of like individual lives? Like what are some ways that you've seen the impact lately of sharing your story?
Yes. Well, I think as it relates to when I wrote the book, I think one of the most impactful messages that I got was a text that I got from a woman in Florida. A friend of mine had given her my book. I didn't even know this woman, but she sent me a text, and she was going through breast cancer at that time. And there's a chapter in my book that kind of describes a time when I had to go into the emergency room because I was the chemo had completely knocked out all my white blood cells, and I had a massive infection. And so I had to be kind of sequestered in the hospital room with antibiotics. And it was just a kind of a scary time. And she sent me this text and a picture of her holding my book open to that chapter in the hospital room. And she said, I am exactly where you were. And I just happened to be reading this chapter at this moment. And thank you, because your story is giving me hope that I'm going to make it, that I'm going to get out of here. So that was a big one. And then another time was when I was doing a book signing at Barnes & Noble. And actually a gentleman came up to the table with my book, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I'm going through a financial crisis, and I read your story, and it has given me so much hope that I can get through what I'm going through, this trial that I'm experiencing right now. And he had things underlined and Post-it notes, and that blew me away there too, because it just felt like, again, it doesn't matter if it's breast cancer or some other type of trial, just being able to be willing to share that can really impact people's lives.
Yeah, storytelling is just incredible, and that's part of the mission here, and why we're so thankful that you've come on to share your story is, man, people are truly and deeply impacted and motivated and encouraged by people's stories, even if it doesn't line up, right? Because sometimes I think we think that, like, if they haven't gone through exactly well, how can my story help? Well, how can my story help? And it's like, you don't understand, like, there's nuggets of just truth and wisdom in everybody's story, and we all have a testimony, and the power that we have in our story when we share it, it's going to inspire and it's going to motivate other people. I mean, that's why God says it's like we have the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Those are the two things we have, and everybody has a testimony.
Right.
Yeah, and Jamie and I were talking before the podcast too of like this awesome stories we've got to hear from the other guests on the podcast, and like there's a lot of podcasts that will just teach something, teach how to, but there's so many lessons that can be learned in the diversity of everybody's different stories. Like there's a lot of similarities, but just to hear all those different stories and have a place where we can share that with other people has just been awesome. So what would be your word of encouragement to somebody who's fearful of sharing their story?
Yeah. I think something that was said to me when I was fearful of sharing my story, even just when it started, I was afraid to let my book be released because it's a very personal, and I was very fearful to do that. I was very fearful to share when I had breast implant illness. It took me 6 months to share that. And I often joke, like, okay, Lord, why did you give me this topic to talk about? Why couldn't I talk about saving puppies or something?
Yeah.
But no, I have to talk about female anatomy. Like, this is not comfortable. But I think that it's so important to push past those fears because there's so much good on the other side. And what someone told me was 2 words, and they said, someone's waiting. There's someone waiting to hear your story. There's someone waiting to know that they're not alone. They're not the only one that's going through what you went through. There's someone waiting to know that there is light on the other side of this darkness. And there's someone waiting to know, how do I get there? So if by sharing your story can do that for someone, even if it's one person, that's all that matters. So I would just say just that. Don't be afraid to share your story. Obviously, there's levels of, I guess, tact when it comes to sharing your story. And I think you just have to be very clear and on that and what that looks like.
Yeah.
But gosh, if you've been given something to share, do it. It's the one thing that someone can never refute. People can always argue about political topics or things like that, but no one can argue about your story because it's yours.
It's yours, yeah. Yeah. And I remember when we had Spencer on, he talked about, like, why do I have to have this addiction? Why can't I have that addiction? And why I think mine's the worst, and the alcoholic thinks his is the worst, and the drug addict thinks his is, like, everybody thinks yours is the worst, but the reality is you just have to share it. So is there a line between being, like, too vulnerable to people? Like you said, there's tact and sharing. Is there a line between just being very wishy-washy and sharing absolutely everything and really thinking through and how you want to articulate your story?
Absolutely. There's one thing I always tell my girls, my 2 daughters. I always say, keep it classy.
Yeah.
100% keep it classy. If that's how you're talking, what you're wearing, whatever it is, keep it classy.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing goes for sharing your story. I mean, yes, it can be a lot of vulnerability with that, but you really do have to think through and be really intentional on what you share, how you share it, what your audience is, who your audience is, I should say. And, obviously there's certain things you can maybe share with one person that you maybe wouldn't with another. But you just have to use that discernment. And, I do that all the time. If I'm know that I'm going to be talking to someone or speaking to an audience, I just lay it before the Lord. Lord, what do you want me to say? What do these people need to hear? How deep do I need to go? And just get that clarity before you start, you just don't want to word vomit everything out there, because that's not effective either, right? And I think it's just really, really important to just to know exactly, like I said, kind of just who your audience is, and where the biggest impact is going to be, because no one says that you have to share all your stuff. You don't have to share all your secrets, all the things. But what is it about your story that is impactful, that you feel really will help someone, and then keep it classy?
Yeah. That's really good. Anything else you got, Keegan?
No, I would say, just last question would just be, not the last, I got two, I guess. But with sharing your story and writing this book, how do you want to continue to grow that, or to use that, right? Like, I assume it's not just, well, I wrote a book and then I'm done doing it. So where do you see yourself 2-3 years? How do you go forward with sharing stories and using that more?
Right. Well, what I've really seen, especially with this, I guess, second chapter of my health journey with the explant, and is really this focus on the importance of having a healthy body image. And I think so many women and men struggle with negative body image. And I really feel like there's an opportunity to share my story in a broader sense, not just breast cancer, because that is very niche-y, but in a broader sense, with the topic of body image, and being able to love yourself for who you are, not what you are, and what does that look like, and how do you do that? Being someone who, technically by the world's standards is deformed as a woman. So how do I do that? And how can I impart that wisdom and things that I have learned to women and men that may be struggling with the same thing? Because I think it's a huge issue right now, especially with younger generations, college generation. I mean, I hear it all the time that people are really struggling with that.
For sure, yeah. And the more social media grows, the more we're hearing about it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a big issue. And like you said, with social media, there's just so many women are seeing these things on TikTok and all these influencers and on Instagram, and saying, oh, I have to look like that to be accepted, to be attractive. And that's not the case. That's obviously not true, but that's what we're being shown and taught. And so really helping women focus on really knowing who they are and their identity and who they are. And because that will show you really what your purpose is. And there's less focus then on the external, because that's always changing.
Yeah,
always.
I love that, and we've talked about it on other episodes. But look, I'm getting older every single day, every day. Like we're supposed to age and get older, but social media, I think, even beyond the comparison, it's this flood of just over and over and over. You hear the word beauty, and then you see it attached to image. It's always external.
Sure.
So then we just, in our mind, that's what's beautiful, and it's like, literally not. Like it really is. Like, are you like like, is your heart beautiful? Are you compassionate? Are you caring? Are you empathetic? Like, that is what beauty is. Like the same way I would talk about just like worldly possessions, they're wasting away. Right. Like if my beauty is defined on my externals, it's wasting away. Like like you said, who am I? That's beauty. So I love that topic.
Yeah.
I think society in general is kind of taking that statement too and changed it where, like, it doesn't matter what you look like and you don't have to take care of your body, because I don't think that's what you're referring
Not
to,
at
that
all.
it's okay to be overweight, to not take care of your body and be like, because I think our society has almost shared that message. And I don't think that does a service for people who don't have a choice over, like, there's some things you don't have a choice over the way that you look. And you're almost being disrespectful to people that don't have that choice when you're not taking care of your body, and doing the things that are in your control, but not finding your identity in how you look. I'd love to have a six-pack, but that's...
I do.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Jamie. If there's like one word of encouragement to our listeners that you want to leave them with, what would that be?
I would say, like I said earlier, someone's waiting. Someone's waiting to hear your story. And your story is so unique. It's you. No one has your story but you. And it's so important just to get that out there and understand that you can be a light to somebody else. You don't have to have a big platform to do it. It can be your next door neighbor that just needs to know that you care and you understand what they're going through. So be confident in the authority that you have in your own story and give it out to the world because someone's waiting.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We sincerely hope that you learned something today. And as always, we appreciate your support and hope you can all find a way this week to pay it forward.